Morning, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of OwnCon. So about this talk, I just want to get this out of the way at the first. This talk was not designed to embarrass anyone or to point fingers at certain CNAs or flaws. This is a talk to help us all as a community get better. I rely on the NVD data in my day job and the CVE data in my day job every day. I use it. I think most people in this room who are consumers use this data to help protect the internet. So while I do have some criticisms of the data as the way it's currently structured, this is not a talk just for me to pick at the CVE program and NVD. I have some suggestions at the end, and most of this talk will be around the community coming together and helping drive these things forward and other ideas. These are just my ideas. They may not be all right, but just sitting down, this is just what I thought at the time. So a little bit about me. My name is Jerry Gamblin. I'm in the threat detection and response group at Cisco. That's a product group. So I am not in Talos. I am not a part of the CNA groups that Cisco runs. I help develop and input vulnerability data into all of the products at Cisco. So we have Cisco Vulnerability Management. We have an XDR platform. We have a bunch of AI platforms, right? So my job is to take the data from the CVE.org and from NVD and to put it into our products to help protect our end customers. So I have a different view of the data than some of the CNAs sitting in this room and some of the other people. So that is where I come from on this. I am also a member of the quality working group and the automation working group for the CVE program. I would suggest that if you're interested in this data, please join the quality working group program, as that is where a bunch of these get discussed in detail. So super quick here. We're just going to have 3 points. I want to leave time for questions and discussions at the end. We're just going to go over the current challenges, my proposed enhancements to CVE quality, and then what we can do with stakeholder collaboration. So we have a problem with CVEs having incomplete or inaccurate information. That's just a fairly known fact. Does anybody know how many data points a CNA has to provide for a CVE record? 3. There are 3 fields that are required to publish a CVE. Does anybody know how those 3 fields are quality checked? It has to be, here is the only quality check ran on CVEs at this time. The description has to be a string between 1 and 4,916 characters. That is the extent of quality checking that is performed by the CVEs, by the CVE program before publication. We also get the point of minimal data required. These are some of the shortest CVE descriptions in the last 3 years. I tried to find one from 2025. We didn't have any 3-word descriptions this year. We did have a 4-word description. So we're getting a little better. I don't think anybody looking at these CVE descriptions could make a good judgment on what they were for or how they are. And then we get into some data quality issues. Let's just start with the schemas. The CVE schema has 163 keys. Only 60% of those keys in the schema have a description telling you what that key does. And only 50% of the fields tell you what type of data should be in that field. There are 9 total required fields for it to come through publication. 6 of those are automated. And then we talk about the 3 that you have to get from the CNA. The NVD schema is not much better. There are 262 keys in the NVD schema. 3% of those keys have descriptions, and only 1 field is required for the NVD publication. The good part about the NVD is that nobody publishes to those directories. Dr. Benjamin Edwards did a great talk at Vuln Forecast last year, and I'm not going to repeat that, but there's a link at the bottom of this, and I'll share the slides. He talks about CNA completeness and records, and very few CNAs are completing most of their records. This is an excellent This is an eye chart here. You can't see it very well, but if you go to the link at the bottom of this slide, and I'll try to get it shared out. It's on the BIT site website. It really talks about what CNAs fill in which fields. And outside of the top three, everything just dies off. Here's an overview of all of the CVEs published on CVE.org. And somehow, and not somehow, it's because they just added data quality checks before, only 80.1% of all CVEs have the third required field of products. So that means 20% of all CVEs that are published don't even meet the minimum requirements of 3 fields per CVE. This can be checked on Ben's data. I trust Ben's data. He does a great job, but I would really like you to talk to him about the data, and I'm happy to look at it too. But I looked at it at Vuln Forecast, and his methods are great. So I do trust these numbers. So let's get to data issues. I know that nobody likes to talk about this, but what is the source of truth for CVE data? Is it the NVD? Is it CVE.org? What should be considered CVE data? Is CVSS part of CVE data? Is a CWE part of CVE data? Like, to me, those are key parts of CVE data. To other people, they don't matter, right? And there's discussions going on today. Should CPE be a required part of CVE data? What about Pearl? What about an identifier? Are those parts that make a CVE data or not? We also have the ease of bulk data access. The CVE program has decided to put all of their data into a GitHub repo, for better or worse. They no longer have a public API to download data. And to be honest, that has really stopped the use of CVE data in open source projects, period. I just gave a talk yesterday on using Jupyter notebooks for open source projects. I went to GitHub and looked. There are very, very few projects out there that use the CVE source data because A, it's hard to get, and B, it's hard to put together. Like, if you wanted to see all of the CVEs from 2025 that were published by the CVE program, you'd have to download the whole data set and then parse all that data set by the date published to get it, because they've decided to put all the data into the identifiers folders, right? So you can grab the 2025 folder, which you might think is all CVEs published in 2025, but in reality, it's all CVEs with the CVE identifier of CVE-2025-001. So what that does is it makes it hard for people who want to do quick data analysis, see the latest data, to actually dig into that data and to use it. The NVD program, everybody knows they have instability, right? They're giving bulk download access of their 1.1 schema, which is a different schema. And then their API is the 2.0 schema. So if you download the data from there, you might be downloading 2 different sources. So it's hard to compare data together. So at a minimum, we have 3 different sources of CVE data that most of the community uses that are all different. And that's before we start adding in some of the other data sources and third-party databases like OSV and GitHub Security Advisory. So we really need to work on both who is the source of truth for CVE data and make it easy and make it generally available for all the data to be downloaded in one place, and figure out if it is the NVD or if CVE is going to be the source of truth for data, that we develop an API that is worthwhile, and we develop a way to download the data and use it in open source projects, which we'll talk on later. We'll stop there. Does anybody have any questions about this first part of kind of my overview of the CVE data? Because from here on, we're going to talk about some proposed solutions that I have and enhancements that I would like to see made. I cannot speak.
Jerry, can you repeat the question? For
The question is, why isn't there a CVE.org API? There was. I am not 100% sure the technical reasons. I think the decision was made at the board level. Megazone is in here. I don't want to put him on the spot, but he might have an answer to why there's only the GitHub repository and not a public API.
I joined the board after the decision was made, but I was on the working groups while that decision was made. I believe it was mostly just cost. It was the data cost for budget reasons of what using GitHub. In fact, that they're willing to support us basically. I don't want to, no cost really. Doing the bulk downloads there save the program the cost of having to support the data, downloading that bulk data all the time. I kind of agree though. I'd love to see us have an API.
All right, thank you guys. Let's go into some proposed solutions. I really want this to be interactive. So if you have any questions or any thoughts on any of these topics I have, please let me know. And once again, these are just my proposed solutions as part outsider, part insider. I'm on a couple of working groups and I work with this data every day. So these are just my overall thoughts. We need to enhance the publication status, right? CVSS, CPE, and CWE need to be mandatory fields in a CVE record going forward. I know a lot of people don't like that. I know for the longest time, the thing was we need to make this as easy as possible for people to publish CVEs, right? That's why we're at 3 mandatory fields. But if the NVD is going to step back and not be able to enrich the data and make it useful for downstream customers, we need to move that responsibility back to the CNAs to provide that information. We also should get rid of the references and make that be included in the data. Right now, I'm a part of a program from the automated working group that's trying to build a link scraper for the CVE program because of how poorly links go away. We could easily fix this by requiring either a VEX part of the record, or if not, at a minimum, just a markdown plain text of here's what you had in your advisory. We're going to store this data. We don't even have to display it all the time, but in 5 years, when your website's down, we now have a copy of what you said in your advisory. Because right now it's super hard. Scraping is possible, but it's a lot of headaches to get full data control. Because if you've ever tried to scrape a website, sometimes they don't like it if you come from AWS. Sometimes they don't like it if you don't use the right thing. Sometimes you need JavaScript, right? So even the best scrapers that we're going to build is going to be a 90% completion rate. So we'll get 90% of the data in a scraper, which we could easily just fix by saying, hey, can you just turn your advisory into plain text or markdown or VEX or whatever and add it to the records? Even if that isn't a mandatory field, it should be it should be a field that you could use going forward. And we don't have that today. This is the big one. Standardized tooling. The CVE program should build and maintain tooling. They should have a GUI-based, a CLI-based, and popular SDKs. Who knows what the most popular CVE publishing tool is today? Vulnagram. Do you know who writes Vulnagram? Yeah. Do you know how much he gets paid for that? Nothing, right? Do you know how much he's supported? Very little. Do you know that we had to stop pushing out a schema update because he didn't have the time to update the Vulnagram endpoint, right? And it's an open source project. He has a job. He has other responsibilities. It's best effort. But at the end of the day, if the CVE program is going to be serious, at a minimum, they should support these. I'm not saying a complete takeover of Vulnagram or trying to fork it, but a support in some way so that it runs the program. And then when we start doing quality control, you're able to build QC, you're able to build checking into those. I know everybody has their own data workflows at their CNA, but there should be at least a minimal set of tooling that is built and maintained by the CVE program. And to be completely honest, I try not to mention AI a bunch in here because it's not useful. but the CVE program should invest in minimal AI tooling so that A, it can suggest improving descriptions, B, it could suggest CWEs and CVSS scores and CPEs, right? Those all exist. They're all, there was a great talk on CWE. Somebody built a very, very simple model that costs 0.001 cent to run. You give it the description, it picks what CWE it should be. And it was, I think they tested it out to 95% accuracy, right? I would take a 95% accuracy guess than it being blank in most fields, right? But you can't do those things and you can't build that kind of tooling into a program if the program doesn't own and operate basic tooling to do that. I have no problem with open source. I love open source. I love that the community is there. But if the CVE program wants to move forward, they really, really need to take an ownership stake in a minimal viable set of tools to publish CVEs.
We have a comment in the Discord here. Requiring CVSS, CPE, and CWE sounds like a good idea, but would be a major blocker for small OSS projects. This is just too much effort to learn what the stuff is, not even mentioning how to do it right.
Yeah, that can, I think that was an excuse. Now, I think that was the stance of the CVE program for the last 25 years is we're going to sit the bar down here so everybody can just put in data. And we see that even with the bar at 3, we still get bad data put into the database. So I don't think raising the bar here is going to stop that many people from doing it. I have some other suggestions later in the program about training. I am sure that if you're a CNA, the CVSS program would love to give you 45 minutes on how to score your CVEs. I don't think it's a problem. And I think that that's one of the key things we need to lean into is that just saying, oh, somebody won't do it because it's hard means that we won't do it as a community is probably a bad place to be in 2025.
Hi. Love this session, by the way. So what about like a certification program? Is that an idea?
That's coming up.
Oh, okay.
We're there. We're getting there.
Okay, cool.
The last one is quality validation process. All VCVs should have to pass a well-documented and maintained validation process, right? There should be something that is written and maintained. It says, here's what a great CVE looks like, and you're going to match this in some way. And we can walk in there, even if you just start by adding regex to most of the schema so that it's matching and matching well. We can then get into the wide, crazy world of AI to help with description and CW and CVSS. But at some point, we have to step back and say, we're not going to do the point where we just allow three fields to be a CVE record. Let's talk about stakeholder collaboration. And this is where everybody in the room can help. And I would love everybody in the room to help. The CVE program should start an open source working group tomorrow. I'm surprised they don't have one, but if the tooling is going to stay open source, we should have an open source working group for the CVE program. I'm sure that the Open Source Security Foundation and others would be super interested in working with that and helping it. The CNA tooling has to be formalized. I know that the CVE program doesn't have unlimited resources, but having a minimal set of tooling that allows people to submit records that are checked and enriched is going to be an important part. And we need to remember the data consumers. We should host a hackathon. I think that was something that was missing at VulnCon. I'm going to suggest next year is some kind of half-a-day hackathon to just come and hack on the data. And then there's a data science community called Kaggle that runs competitions where you say, here's our data set. Please tell me what you could do with it. And students and other people take that data and build great virtualizations and great models with it and gives it back to the community. Those are normally free, are very cheap. Get somebody to sponsor some prizes. Sometimes the prizes are, you know, $100 Amazon gift card for the top one, up to whatever, depending on how you want to motivate people. But we don't have the data there. That's a very low cost thing that we could do as a community to get people to look at this data. This one is really big for me. It's communication. Does anybody know how to reach out to the CVE program? Does everybody know that they have a Slack, but it's not official? It's kind of both ways, right? Like, I don't know what you need to have the official stamp on it on the Slack that says, this is how you talk to the CVE program or other people in the CVE program. But it's made very clear that the Slack that only has a few hundred people in there is not official and is not a valid communication mechanism. In 2025, that has to change. Nobody has an SLA on what they expect out of that, right? But having a community where you say, this is the community Slack, you can come in here, it's best effort. We're gonna have all the CNAs in there, the board members can be in there if they want, but just a place that isn't deemed non-official would be a great place. I don't know what it takes to get that. And I know that some people at the program have, when I've talked about it, they've been worried that it then puts some kind of onus on them to monitor and maintain it, which I don't think it does. But on the other hand, they do use it to make public announcements, which has always been kind of up in the air to me. We need to increase our community involvement. I went back and looked. The CVE program, our NVD, has not been at RSA, our Black Hat, that I could tell for the last 5+ years. That was just a quick look, right?
We have some questions in here, it looks like. Could you provide links to the Slack channel, etc.?
Yeah, I will add the link to the Slack after the session.
There's a longer one up here that I lost. There it is. You were talking about validation process. This questioner asked someone else, another speaker yesterday, about quality process and review, about when a CNA assigns CVE. Do you think this work should be done through an official quality documentation? I think that's in quotes. That will be mandatory for some requesting to be a CNA.
Yeah, I think that setting up a minimums quality for what your CVEs look like is a no-brainer. I mean, I don't know how anybody can argue that we shouldn't have a minimum quality bar for there. The documentation is probably another issue, and we'll work on that. On to education and training. There should be certification for CNAs, right? Everybody loves to get a good certification. And there should be certifications for the vulnerability data consumers too, that said, hey, you've come in, you've taken a half-a-day class, you know what the data looks like, here's how you're supposed to use it, here's how you're supposed to interpret it, so that there's not 15 different interpretations of the data. These are things that the program could set up and easily provide. This is a great event. I love this event, but it's year 2, and it's still only 450 people. There are more than 450 people in the world who care about CVE data and using it. And to be completely honest, it still skews very, very heavily to CNAs and to PCERT teams, which I understand that that's the main environment, but you're not producing this data for the void. You're producing this data for companies to use, for individuals to use, for academics to use. And we really need to lean into that group and to make them feel welcome at these events and to take their input and advice seriously. And then my last one is we need standardized reporting. I know they have the CNA enrichment list that they list, but I don't think that goes far enough. I really think that there should be quarterly public reporting that lists every CNA, how many CVEs they put out, what fields they are filling in and how. This wouldn't be to embarrass anybody. It would just be, here's what the CNAs are publishing and here's the data they provide, right? A public scorecard should never embarrass anybody. if you want, I don't see why we don't go out and publish the stats as a CVE program more openly. And even if you wanted to, even if you just wanted to send the reports to the CNAs directly for the first year or whatever, I'm more than willing to stand up and provide that data and those scripts to run those. Scott, you have a question, I think. And with that, we'll just use the rest of the time for questions.
So I understand that, CVE doesn't want to push more regulations to push more people out because they want people submitting information. But how are they going to add more rules and regulations if the current rules aren't even enforced in the first place?
That is a good question. I think that the start is to start enforcing the rules and to start being more strict on solutions, right? Like the rules are so limited now, you have to start somewhere. And I think that we have to, the program has to lean in and say, we're going to get serious, and here's what we're going to do starting July 1st. Here's what we're going to do starting January. I don't think you can just do it all in one slope, but there does need to be a steady walk to adding more and more validation and credibility around the data. And I think that when I talk about the quality of CVEs, a lot of people think I'm talking about the junk CVEs that slide in a little bit. Those CVEs that I showed at the back at the beginning of the talk that were 3 or 4 words long, those are all considered super valid. Like nobody would say that these CVEs don't meet the minimum quality requirements for publication, but anybody who needs to use this data would say, I have no idea what to do with this data, right? So you have an elevation of privilege in what product, in what thing, and what configuration, right? Like those are the things that we need to get to even outside of CVEs that look like they're just, in quotes, junk. It's the next level up of valid CVE records that offer little usage. We have 1 minute left. Does anybody have any further questions?
Yes. Because I love all the. I love all the ideas, but it's always like, what will happen with those
Yeah.
ideas after this event?
So I'm going to continue to go to every quality working group meeting and every automation working group meeting and continue to raise a fuss until they kick me out. Basically, I'm trying. I am walking a fine line in between trying to be a good community member and a productive community member, and also pushing people forward in those groups. Right. I'm not on the board, so I'm a level below where I have any direct say. But I'm seeing good movement from the board. I saw that they have paused CNA additions because we've added a bunch of CNAs who haven't published anything. So I think they're really starting to take CVE data quality seriously and the growth of the program seriously. And I think that they're leaning into that. And I hope to see them continue to do that. So with that, I want to say thank you for everybody coming out. Once again, this wasn't supposed to be an open criticism of anybody. These are all ideas. I have bad ideas all the time. So if these were bad, please tell me afterwards. Or if you'd like to work on these ideas, please see me too. I'm more than glad to help. And these are things I would like to see used in the program in the future, because I really think that we could lean in and help create quality for everybody. Because I think at the end of the day, CVE quality is just as important to the CNA as it is to the data consumers. So thank you guys very, very much for your time today and for listening to me on this topic.